The sound of glass breaking filled the living room. I was standing in the hallway, frozen, my small hands gripping the wooden frame of the door. My heart beat so fast I thought it would burst out of my chest. On the floor was my mother. Her soft pink dress was torn at the shoulder, and her long brown hair was scattered across the shiny marble tiles. There was blood on her lip, and her eyes were wet with tears. Above her stood my father. To the world, he was a great man, rich, respected, admired. But to us, inside these walls, he was a monster. His face was red with anger, his eyes full of fire. "You dare talk back to me in my house?" he shouted, throwing the rest of his drink across the room. The smell of alcohol mixed with blood in the air. My mother tried to speak, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean." Slap. The sound echoed so loud it felt like the walls themselves shook. Her head snapped to the side, her hair covering her face. I wanted to run to her. I wanted to scream. But my feet would not move. My throat was dry, and my whole body felt trapped in fear. Father bent down, grabbed her chin, and forced her to look at him. "You are nothing without me. Nothing. Don't you ever forget that." Her eyes, red and broken, moved slightly toward the hallway. Toward me. She saw me hiding there. She didn't ask for help. She didn't cry out my name. Instead, her eyes begged me not to come closer. To stay hidden. That hurt me more than anything. Even in her pain, she was trying to protect me. Father pushed her away like she was trash and walked out, slamming the door so hard the floor shook. The moment he left, I ran. I dropped to my knees and grabbed her hands. "Mom. Mom, are you okay? I'll call the police. I'll tell someone." She quickly pressed her hand against my lips, shaking her head with fear. "No. You can't. Nobody will help us. They're all on his side." I didn't understand. How could nobody help? How could everyone just let this happen? But later, I would learn. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I could still hear her muffled cries through the wall. I clenched my fists so hard that my nails dug into my palms. The smell of whiskey and blood clung to my memory. I was just a boy, small, weak, powerless. But something inside me changed that night. My tears dried, leaving behind a fire. I whispered into the darkness. "I will never cry again. One day, I'll make them all cry instead." The days that followed were no better. My father's rage came like storms, loud, violent, and unstoppable. Everyone around us knew. The neighbors heard the shouting. Relatives saw the bruises. But no one spoke. No one helped. Some even mocked her. At family gatherings, my aunts would whisper behind their hands, smiling with pity that wasn't real. "Poor woman," one of them said once. "But at least she's rich. That's something." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her what really happened in that house. But my mother's gentle hand on my shoulder kept me quiet. She always stayed quiet. At school, teachers praised my father for his donations. They called him a man of honor. Every time I heard it, I felt sick. They didn't see him throwing plates at my mother's head. They didn't hear her sobs at night. They didn't see the bruises that covered her arms. But I did. One night, after another fight, she came to sit on my bed. Her face was swollen, but her voice was soft as she brushed back my hair. "You must promise me something," she whispered. "Don't let him break you. Don't let him turn you into him." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't nod. I didn't promise. Because deep inside, I already knew the truth. He had broken me, but not into weakness. He had carved something else inside me, something sharp, something dangerous. I closed my eyes and whispered into the night. "One day, Mom. One day, I'll make him pay. And not just him. Every single person who stood by and watched will pay too." And in that moment, my childhood ended. The years passed, but the bruises never stopped. By the time I turned 13, I had already learned to read the signs. The sharp smell of whiskey meant trouble. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs meant my mother should stay silent. The slight twitch in my father's jaw meant he was about to explode. I hated myself for memorizing these things. No child should live like this. But for me, it was normal. My mother moved like a ghost inside the house. She cooked, she cleaned, she smiled in front of guests. But I could see through it. I saw the way her shoulders curled in fear whenever father entered the room. I saw how she pressed makeup over the blue marks on her skin. I was still young, but inside I felt older than my years. One evening, I came home from school to find her in the kitchen. She was standing by the sink, washing dishes, but her hands were trembling. I saw the fresh cut across her arm. "Mom," I whispered. She turned quickly, hiding her arm behind her back. "It's nothing. Just a small accident." But I knew it wasn't an accident. That night, I made a decision. If no one in this world was going to save her, then I would. I began to study, not just school books, but everything I could find. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I sat with my small laptop and searched for things other kids my age never cared about. Psychology, law, hacking, how people hide their money, how men like my father destroy others and walk away clean. At school, I was invisible. Teachers praised me for my grades, classmates ignored me. That was fine. The less attention I drew, the more time I had to prepare. But sometimes when I looked at my mother, I felt torn apart. She still tried to protect me from the storm. Once when I was 14, Father threw a glass at her. It missed and shattered on the wall. A piece of it cut across my arm as I stood too close. Blood ran down to my wrist. Father didn't even look at me. He stormed away, shouting curses. I remember my mother rushing to me, tears streaming down her face as she pressed a cloth to the cut. "I can't let this keep happening," I told her. She shook her head, crying harder. "Please don't say that. Please just stay strong. Just survive." But I didn't want to survive. I wanted to fight back. By the time I turned 16, my hatred was no longer just a boy's anger. It was something darker, sharper. I watched carefully as Father worked. He was a businessman, always surrounded by powerful people. Politicians, police officers, wealthy partners. They all laughed at his jokes, clapped at his speeches, shook his hand like he was a king. They didn't know, or maybe they didn't care, what kind of man he truly was. But I cared. And I was watching. One night, when he had passed out drunk on the sofa, I slipped into his office. The room smelled of cigar smoke and expensive leather. His desk was covered with papers, contracts, numbers. I opened one of the drawers and found files. Documents that showed money moving places it shouldn't. Names of people who owed him favors. Names of people he had crushed to get what he wanted. I didn't understand it all yet, but I took notes. I memorized. I copied what I could, because someday I would need this. At 17, something inside me finally changed. I no longer flinched when he raised his hand. I no longer froze when he shouted. Instead, I studied him like a hunter studies prey. I began to realize that revenge wasn't about anger. It wasn't about rushing in with fists and screams. That would only get me killed. No. Real revenge was about patience. It was about letting the enemy believe he was untouchable. Until the moment he wasn't. Still, the hardest part was watching my mother. Her body had grown thinner over the years, her skin paler. But her eyes, those soft, tired eyes, still held love whenever she looked at me. Sometimes she would brush my hair back and whisper, "Don't become like him." But what she didn't know was that I already was, in a way. Not his cruelty, not his fists, not his madness. But his strength. His ruthlessness. His hunger to win. Only this time, it would not be used to break her. It would be used to free her. I remember one night, just before my 18th birthday. The house was quiet. Father was away on a business trip. My mother and I sat on the porch together. The stars stretched across the sky, and for once there was peace. She looked at me, her voice soft. "You've grown so fast. Sometimes I feel like you're not my little boy anymore." I turned to her and held her hand. "I'll always be your son, but I won't be little forever. One day, you'll never have to be afraid again. I promise." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were not only tears of pain. There was something else in them, hope. And as I sat there, the night air cool on my skin, I knew my path was clear. I wasn't just going to survive my father. I was going to destroy him. I was 19 the night my mother finally told me the truth. It was late, almost midnight. The house was silent except for the steady ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Father was gone on a business trip, and the air felt lighter without him. My mother sat at the edge of the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. I had seen that look before, the look she wore when she was trapped in her memories. I sat beside her quietly. "Mom," I asked softly, "what are you thinking about?" For a long time she didn't answer. Then she let out a shaky breath and said, "You're old enough now. You should know the truth." Her voice was so quiet, so fragile. It made my heart tighten. "The truth about what?" I asked. She turned her eyes to me, and I saw something I had never seen before: shame. "When I was young," she began, "before I married your father, my family was respected. We had a business, land, and enough money to live with dignity. My father trusted your father. He thought he was a good man, clever and ambitious. He believed they could build something great together." Her voice broke, and she clasped her hands tighter. "But it was all a lie. Your father betrayed him. He tricked my father into signing documents that transferred everything, our land, our money, our business, into his control. Overnight, my family lost everything. We were ruined." I felt my blood run cold. "My father couldn't bear the shame," she whispered, tears now running down her cheeks. He took his own life. My mother fell sick soon after and never recovered. And I was left with nothing. No one would marry a girl from a disgraced family. No one wanted me. Except..." Her words trailed off, but I already knew who she meant. "Except him," I finished bitterly. She nodded. "Your father offered me mercy. He said if I married him, he would let me live in comfort. But it was never mercy. It was punishment. He wanted me as a trophy, a reminder of what he had destroyed. He wanted me to live every day knowing I was his prisoner." Her hands covered her face as she sobbed quietly. I sat frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. All this time, I thought my father's cruelty began after their marriage. But now I realized, it started long before. He didn't just abuse my mother. He destroyed her entire world. Slowly, she lowered her hands and looked at me. Her eyes, though filled with tears, burned with something stronger: anger. "I never told you because you were too young. But now you're a man. You should know the truth. He didn't only hurt me. He destroyed my family. And he didn't do it alone." Her words caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "He had help," she whispered. "Business partners, lawyers, friends. They all knew what he was doing. Some even encouraged him. They shared in the profit while my family sank into ruin. They laughed behind our backs. To this day, they still praise him for his success, knowing full well how he got it." I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles turned white. Every word she spoke cut deeper into me. "So it wasn't just him," I said slowly. She shook her head. "No, it was all of them." There was a silence after that, heavy and suffocating. Then she leaned closer, her voice trembling. "Promise me something, my son." I looked at her, my chest tight. "What?" "When the time comes, when you strike back, don't just punish him. Don't just break him. Make them all fall. Every last one of them." Her eyes burned into mine, full of pain and desperation. It was the first time she had ever spoken of revenge. Until now, she had only asked me to stay strong, to survive. But tonight was different. Tonight, she gave me permission to carry the fire inside me. I took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "I promise, Mom. One day they'll all pay. Not just him, the whole rotten world that stood by his side." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mother's words replaying in my mind. All my life, I had thought revenge meant destroying my father. But now I understood. It wasn't enough. Destroying him would be just the beginning. I had to tear down everything he had built. His partners, his allies, the corrupt system that kept him safe. Every single one of them who had smiled while my mother's world burned. Only then would justice be complete. The next morning, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see the boy who cried in the dark. I didn't see the boy who hid in the hallway while his mother was beaten. I saw something new. I saw a hunter. And the hunt had just begun. I was 21 when I began to wear the mask. On the outside, I became what my father wanted, a loyal, obedient son. I laughed at his jokes. I sat beside him at meetings. I learned the way he handled his empire. People looked at us and said, "What a strong father and son. The boy is following in his father's footsteps." If only they knew the truth. Inside, every smile I gave him was poison. Every handshake, every nod of respect was just another piece of the trap I was building. At first, my father didn't trust me. He had always seen me as weak, too soft, too much like my mother. But as the years passed, he started to believe my act. "You're learning well, boy," he told me one evening as we sat in his office. He poured himself a drink, his voice thick with pride. "One day, all this will be yours." I smiled politely, hiding the fire in my chest. Yes, I thought. It will be mine. But not the way you imagine. I watched him carefully, memorizing every move he made. How he bribed officials, how he silenced enemies, how he hid money in places no one could trace. I studied his network of partners and friends, noting which ones were loyal and which ones were greedy. At night, when the house was quiet, I worked in secret. I reached out to people he had destroyed. Small business owners, old rivals, even distant relatives. Some were afraid to talk, but others were desperate for justice. Then I found allies in unexpected places, hackers, journalists, and people who hated men like my father but had no power on their own. With them, I shared pieces of information, feeding their hunger for truth. Slowly, I was weaving a net around him. But the most important piece was still my mother. She watched me with careful eyes, sometimes proud, sometimes afraid. She knew I was planning something, but she didn't ask. She simply sat with me during late nights, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, whispering, "Don't rush. Patience wins wars." Her words stayed with me. So I waited. I began to join my father at his grand parties. The rooms were filled with politicians, businessmen, men in expensive suits with fake smiles. They praised my father as if he were a king. "Your son is impressive," they would say. "A fine young man. He will carry your name with honor." My father would beam with pride, patting my back. "Yes, he will. He is my blood after all." They laughed and toasted to his success, blind to the fact that I was studying every one of them. Every smile, every handshake, every weakness. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of such a party, a man approached me quietly. He was older, with tired eyes, and I remembered seeing him once at a meeting years ago. "You don't belong in this world," he said softly, almost like a warning. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He glanced back toward the glowing hall, where my father was laughing with his friends. "Your father is a wolf. And those men are wolves too. But your eyes are different. You're not like him." I forced a smile. "Maybe you're mistaken." He shook his head. "No. I can see it. You're waiting for something." He leaned closer and whispered, "If you ever decide to act, find me. I've been waiting too." Before I could respond, he disappeared back into the crowd. That was the night I realized something important. I wasn't alone anymore. Back at home, I began to create two versions of myself. To my father, I was his shadow. I followed him everywhere, learning, obeying, gaining his trust. He began giving me access to his files, his accounts, his secrets. But in the shadows, I was his enemy. I copied documents. I built connections. I planted seeds of doubt among his allies. It was slow, careful work. One mistake and he would destroy me without a second thought. But I was patient. Then one evening my mother came to me. Her face was pale, her eyes full of worry. "I see what you're doing," she whispered. "And I'm proud of you. But I'm also afraid." "Afraid of what?" I asked gently. "That he will break you before you break him." I held her hands tightly. "He won't, Mom. I've waited too long. Every scar he gave you, every tear you cried, it's carved into me. This isn't just revenge anymore. This is justice. For you. For Grandpa. For everyone he destroyed." Her lips trembled, and she finally nodded. "Then promise me one thing." "What?" "When the time comes, don't stop at him. Tear it all down. Leave nothing standing." I looked into her eyes and said the words she had been waiting years to hear. "I promise." From that night forward, I wasn't just planning revenge. I was building an empire of shadows. And one day soon, the empire of my father would crumble beneath it. The city glowed with the warmth of summer, But inside Maria's heart there was no sunshine. Every smile she wore in public was carefully painted, like a mask hiding the storms that raged beneath. Her son Daniel knew this mask well by now. He had watched her practice it in the mirror, forcing her lips to curve while her eyes remained cold and distant. "It has to look real," Maria had once told him. "They must never know what's coming." And Daniel had nodded, his fists tightening. For the first time in his young life he had learned to smile like his mother, an empty, polite smile hiding fire. One evening, Maria decided to attend a family dinner at Uncle Greg's house. Greg was her late husband's younger brother, a charming but careless man who never liked to involve himself in family drama. He had been distant when her husband's will was read, shrugging it off as not his business. Maria hadn't forgotten his silence. When she and Daniel entered Greg's luxurious home, filled with laughter, Maria placed her mask firmly on her face. "Maria." "Daniel." Finally, Greg greeted them warmly, pulling her into a hug. "It's been too long." Maria returned the embrace with a soft smile. "Yes, too long. You've done well for yourself." Her eyes scanned the expensive decor, gold-framed mirrors, velvet chairs, crystal glasses shining on the table. Greg laughed, proud. "Business has been good. But you know, family dinners are better than money." Daniel bit his tongue, stopping himself from blurting out how family had abandoned them when they needed help. He kept his expression calm, copying his mother's mask. At the table, Maria listened to the chatter about vacations, new cars, and promotions. Nobody mentioned the nights she and Daniel had gone without heat in winter. Nobody remembered the hospital bills she had begged to pay after her husband's death. "Daniel." Aunt Claire leaned forward, smiling with wine-stained lips. "You must be thinking about college now. What do you plan to study?" Daniel met her gaze, his jaw tight. "Law," he said. There was a pause. Forks clinked. Maria hid her smirk behind a sip of water. "Law." Greg raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious. Takes years of study, lots of money." "Yes," Daniel replied firmly. "But some things are worth the effort." Maria felt a strange pride swelling in her chest. Her son wasn't just learning her mask, he was learning her fire. Later that night, after they returned home, Maria pulled out a small notebook. She had been writing in it secretly, pages filled with names, dates, and debts owed. Daniel sat beside her, curious. "What is this, Mom?" he asked. Maria ran her finger down the list. "It's our map of revenge. Every person who turned their back on us is here. Some hurt us openly, some by silence. But silence is also betrayal." Daniel leaned closer, his eyes shining in the dim light. "So Greg too?" Maria nodded slowly. "Yes. He had the money to help us. He had the influence. But he chose to stay comfortable while we suffered. His punishment will be slow." Daniel swallowed. For a moment he hesitated. "Mom, is this really justice? Or is it just cruelty?" Maria's eyes softened for the first time that night. She placed her hand on his. "Justice feels cruel to those who never faced pain. But we know what we lost. They will never understand unless they taste it." The boy nodded. His heart still wrestled with doubt, but the fire in his mother's voice made him believe. In the weeks that followed, Maria perfected her role as the smiling, forgiving widow. She attended family gatherings, helped at the church, and even brought cookies to neighbors who had once gossiped about her. Everyone began to say, "Maria has finally healed." But behind the curtain, she was pulling strings. Greg received invitations to small charity events, supposedly from friends. At each event, Maria ensured he donated money without realizing how much he was giving. When his signature was needed, she made sure it came with extra zeros. "People will start whispering about his finances soon," Maria explained to Daniel one evening, sliding a document across the table. "He doesn't even notice how quickly he's bleeding." Daniel scanned the papers. "And when he does notice?" Maria's smile turned sharp. "He'll look around for help. But no one will trust him anymore." The mask of politeness had become her greatest weapon. One afternoon, Daniel came home late, his hands trembling. Maria noticed instantly. "Where were you?" she asked gently. Daniel hesitated, then pulled a small USB drive from his pocket. "At Greg's office." Maria's eyes widened. Daniel, what did you do? I copied files from his assistant's computer, Daniel confessed. Emails, contracts, everything. He's been avoiding taxes. If this gets out, he'll be ruined. For a moment, Maria just stared at him. Then slowly, a proud smile spread across her face. You've taken your first step, she whispered. I'm proud of you. But Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted his mother's pride. Yet a part of him feared the darkness growing inside him. As the plan moved forward, Daniel began to notice something troubling. His mother seemed to feed on revenge. Each victory, each small piece of Greg's downfall, made her livelier, sharper, almost joyful. One night, Daniel asked quietly, Mom, when this is over, will we stop? Will we be free? Maria looked at him, her expression unreadable. When it's over, we'll see. Daniel didn't like that answer. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. He loved his mother more than anything, but he was starting to fear her too. The day finally came when Greg's business partners confronted him. Maria had planted just enough doubt, leaked just enough information, to make them suspicious. At a dinner party, one of them asked casually, Greg, is it true you've been moving funds offshore? Greg choked on his drink. What? No. Who told you that? The whispers began. One by one, his allies pulled away. Deals collapsed. Invitations stopped coming. Maria watched it all with calm satisfaction. Beside her, Daniel kept his mask on. But inside, his stomach churned. He wondered, if they could do this to Greg, what stopped them from doing it to anyone? Late at night, Daniel caught his reflection in the mirror. He saw his polite smile, his careful eyes, the mask he had practiced for months. For the first time, he didn't recognize himself. Am I becoming like her? He thought. Is this what she wants me to be? He pressed his hands against the glass, whispering, I just want to be free. But freedom felt like a dream slipping further away with each step he took beside his mother. And deep down, Daniel knew, once revenge began, it was almost impossible to stop. The night after Jonathan's disappearance was restless for everyone in the small town. People whispered, rumors spread, but no one dared to speak too loudly. Jonathan had been powerful, feared, and untouchable for years. The fact that he was suddenly gone shook people to their bones. For Claire and Ethan, it was the first night they had slept peacefully in years. Yet when the morning came, peace was replaced by something sharper, purpose. Revenge wasn't complete. Jonathan had been only the head of the serpent. His allies, his friends who had watched silently as he abused, cheated, and destroyed, were still roaming freely. And Ethan had no intention of letting them escape. Ethan sat at the old wooden table, staring at the morning light streaming through their cracked kitchen window. His mother poured tea quietly, her hands trembling only slightly. For years, she had learned to hide her fear behind silence. But this morning, she looked different. There was something powerful about her now, something unbreakable. Mom, Ethan said softly, it's not over. You know that, right? Claire met his gaze. Her blue eyes, tired and marked by years of pain, held a spark he hadn't seen before. I know, she whispered. But we've already taken the biggest step. He's gone. That man will never hurt us again. Ethan shook his head firmly. It's not enough. He had people, Mom. People who helped him, who laughed when he insulted you, who turned away when he hit me. They all thought he was untouchable. They made him stronger by protecting his name. And now, Ethan's lips curled into a grim smile. Now it's time to show them what it feels like to lose everything. For a moment, Claire said nothing. She just watched her son, her boy who had been broken so many times, but had never truly given up. Then she nodded slowly. What's your plan? She asked. Ethan had been waiting for that question. Jonathan left trails, he explained. Bank statements, secret accounts, fake property deeds. I've seen them. Remember all those nights I pretended to be asleep while he worked in the study? I wasn't asleep. I watched. I learned. He trusted his own arrogance so much that he never thought anyone would dare to use his secrets against him. Claire's hand covered her mouth in shock. You know where everything is? Not just where, Ethan said, lowering his voice. I know who he was protecting and who was protecting him. Judges, lawyers, business partners. Even that fake pastor who blessed him every Sunday while stealing from his own congregation. Claire's eyes widened. That's too dangerous, Ethan. They won't let us expose them. They'll come after us. They can try, Ethan said coldly. But this time, we'll be ready. We'll use their own greed, their own corruption against them. Just like Jonathan taught me all those years, except I'll do it better. For the first time, Claire reached across the table and held her son's hand. Then I'll stand with you. Whatever happens, we do it together. Their first target was Mr. Lewis, Jonathan's lawyer, and the man who had kept every police case against him buried. He had forged documents, bribed officials, and made sure Jonathan never saw a single day behind bars. Ethan walked into Lewis's office like a ghost from the past. The lawyer looked up from his desk, startled, his face pale when he recognized Jonathan's son. Ethan? What are you doing here? Ethan smiled coldly. Just visiting. Thought you'd like to know you're next. Before Lewis could speak, Ethan placed a thick envelope on the desk. Inside were copies of every forged document, every bribe, every dirty case file. Ethan leaned in close, his voice calm but deadly. You've got two choices, he whispered. Confess everything and watch your world crumble. Or wait until I release this to the press. Either way, you're finished. Lewis's hands shook as he opened the envelope. His mouth moved, but no words came out. He was cornered. And Ethan knew it. By nightfall, the news had broken. A respected lawyer exposed for corruption, bribery, and fraud. Ethan didn't need to lift a finger after that. The public tore Lewis apart. Claire watched the news with tears in her eyes. Ethan, what have you started? Justice, he replied one by one. Jonathan's allies began to fall. The crooked pastor was caught with stolen donations after Ethan sent anonymous tips. A business partner was arrested for tax fraud when Ethan leaked hidden accounts. Even the police captain who had ignored Jonathan's crimes was suddenly suspended after Ethan released recordings of him accepting bribes. It was like watching dominoes fall, each piece crashing into the next. And with every fall, Ethan and Claire felt lighter. But revenge is never simple. With every victory came new enemies. Late one night, a brick crashed through their window with a note tied to it. Stop or you'll join him in the grave. Claire's hands shook as she picked up the note. Ethan, they know it's us. Ethan clenched his jaw. Good. Let them know. Fear is a weapon, Mom. They used it against us for years. Now it's our turn. Simply. Yet as powerful as Ethan felt, there were moments of weakness too. One evening, he sat alone in his room, staring at the old photograph of his father, Jonathan. Despite everything, despite the abuse, the cruelty, the nightmares, he still felt the ghost of love. The love of a child who had once begged for his father's approval. He whispered into the dark, "Why wasn't I enough for you?" Claire found him there, shoulders shaking, and sat beside him silently. She didn't speak, she just held him. "You don't have to carry all of this alone," she said softly. "I carried his shadow for years. I don't want you to do the same." Ethan buried his face in his mother's shoulder. For the first time since their revenge had begun, he allowed himself to cry. After weeks of strikes, one last man remained, Senator Grayson, Jonathan's most powerful ally. He had protected Jonathan for decades, using politics and influence to shield him from justice. Without Grayson, Jonathan would never have survived so long. Ethan's plan was bold, dangerous, and almost reckless. But it was the only way. "We lure him in," Ethan explained to his mother. "Make him believe we've got evidence that could bury him. He'll try to silence us. And when he does, we'll record everything. His threats, his bribes, even his violence. The world will finally see who he really is." Claire looked terrified. "Ethan, if this goes wrong." "It won't." Ethan cut her off. His eyes burned with determination. "Because this time, we're the ones holding the knife." They arranged the meeting at an abandoned warehouse outside town. Grayson arrived in a black car, flanked by 2 bodyguards. His sharp suit and cold smile made Claire's stomach turn. "So," Grayson sneered, stepping forward. "Jonathan's boy thinks he's a man now. And the widow too. Brave of you to summon me." "Foolish but brave." Ethan stood tall, holding a small black folder. "This is everything I've collected. Every secret account, every bribe, every crime you've hidden. One move from me, and it's all over for you." Grayson chuckled. And you think anyone will believe you? You're nothing. A boy and his broken mother. Ethan smiled thinly. Maybe. But this boy knows how to record conversations. At that moment, the hidden microphone in his jacket blinked red. Every word was being transmitted live to a journalist waiting outside. Grayson's smirk faded. For the first time, he looked uncertain. You wouldn't dare, he muttered. Ethan stepped closer, his voice like steel. I already did. Within days, the news exploded. The senator's career was destroyed. Arrest warrants followed. His allies fled. And just like that, the empire Jonathan had built crumbled into dust. For Claire and Ethan, it wasn't just revenge anymore. It was liberation. For the first time in their lives, they weren't victims. They were survivors, warriors, and victors. As Claire stood with her son, watching the headlines roll across the TV screen, she whispered, "It's over." But Ethan shook his head slowly. His eyes were distant, thoughtful. "No, Mom," he said quietly. "This is just the beginning." The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled with people waiting to see the downfall of the Malik family. Reporters filled the front rows, cameras flashing as soon as the doors opened. Aram held his mother's hand tightly as they walked in together. She wore a plain white shower kameez, her face calm, almost peaceful, but her eyes burned with determination. On the other side, Mr. Malik sat with his lawyers. His once arrogant face was pale. His son, Samir, sat beside him, avoiding eye contact with everyone. When the judge entered, the silence was heavy. Everyone knew this was not just a trial, it was justice years in the making. The lawyer representing Aram and his mother stood tall. "Your Honor, this case is not only about money or property. It is about dignity. It is about a woman who was stripped of everything, her home, her respect, her security, by the greed of a man she once trusted. It is about a boy who grew up watching his mother cry, and today, he stands to give her justice." The courtroom buzzed. Then piece by piece, evidence was presented. Fake documents, forged signatures, bank statements showing how Mr. Malik had siphoned money, recordings of him threatening Aram's mother. Mr. Malik's lawyers tried to argue, but the evidence was undeniable. And then the most powerful moment came. Aram's mother herself stood up to testify. She spoke softly, but every word pierced like a sword. "I was a widow with a small child. I trusted Mr. Malik because he promised to help us. Instead, he destroyed us. He made me feel small, worthless. For years, I stayed silent. But silence is not weakness. Today, I speak not only for myself but for every woman who has been crushed by greed and cruelty. I want my son to see that justice does exist." Her voice broke slightly, but she stood firm. Aram, sitting beside her, had tears in his eyes. He knew this moment was bigger than revenge. This was healing. The judge listened carefully, his face stern. Finally, after hours of arguments, he gave the verdict. "Mr. Malik, this court finds you guilty of fraud, forgery, and harassment. You will face 10 years in prison. Furthermore, all properties taken through illegal means will be returned immediately. The rightful ownership of the Malik estate now belongs to Mrs. Zoya and her son Aram." Gasps filled the courtroom. Mr. Malik collapsed into his chair, his face drained of color. Samir buried his face in his hands. Meanwhile, Aram's mother closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude. For the first time in years, her shoulders felt light. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded them. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward. "How do you feel after this victory?" one asked. Aram looked at his mother and smiled. "This isn't just a victory," he said. "This is the proof that no matter how dark life gets, truth will always win. My mother taught me patience, and today, I saw that patience rewarded. Our revenge wasn't about anger, it was about justice." The crowd clapped. That night, they returned to the same house they were once thrown out of. The gates opened, not with arrogance but with pride. Servants welcomed them respectfully. Aram's mother stood in the grand hall, her eyes moist. "This is the same place where I cried, where I begged," she whispered. "But today I stand here with dignity." Aram hugged her tightly. "Ammi, this house isn't just bricks and walls. It's your victory. It's proof that you never gave up." She smiled, resting her hand on his head. "No, Beta. It's our victory. because a mother's strength is nothing without her son's courage. From that day on, their lives changed. The empire once built on greed was rebuilt with honesty, and the story of a mother and son who defeated betrayal became an inspiration for the whole city. Because revenge wasn't about destruction, it was about reclaiming what was stolen. And in the end, justice tasted sweeter than any revenge.